How can a game force you to peer into your own soul? Well, I'm Dr. Waters, this is Game Design Wit, and today I'm gonna try to explain that. To help explain what I mean by peering into your own soul, let's take a sidestep and look at Guardians of the Galaxy. Odds are you've seen it since it was one of the highest grossing films of 2014. If I asked you to describe me this movie, you'd probably say that it's something about a group of characters that are going around the galaxy trying to protect a stone of some sort. There's a bad guy as well, because it turns out that stone is also his favorite stone of all time. Eventually the Collector, dressed up as Benicio del Toro, shows up and tells the Guardians that that stone is super important. It's like a mystical object known as a red herring. Eventually there's a fight over who gets to keep the stone, and the Guardians win. So, what I just did was give you the movie's plot, the factual stuff like the dialogue, the characters, sequence of events, the setting. It's the stuff you see on screen at a surface level. But what if I were to ask you for the meaning of Guardians of the Galaxy? What the authors were trying to say, or, at the very least, what you thought they were trying to express? For Guardians of the Galaxy, the meaning is about the power of friendship. Or, in more plain terms, how friendship can help you go through tough times. Every character in this movie is stuck with some sort of trauma from their past that they can't seem to let go. It's by relying on each other that they're able to break away from the past. Drax ceases his clearly suicidal tendencies after the death of his family, since he found new meaning in life alongside his guardian friends. Raccoon is able to find peers that see him for who he really is, and not just what he is. Groot is able to end his self-centered egoism of talking just about himself. Lastly, Star-Lord is able to finally confront his mother's death, something he literally ran away from his whole life. You know that scene near the end where he sees his mother in bed extending her hand? It's the exact same scene from the beginning, but this time, instead of running away from his pain, Star-Lord is able to confront it by reaching out to hold his friend's hand. Themes can exist in any work of art, be it books, film, painting, fashion, and yes, even games. To exemplify themes in games, let's take a look at Final Fantasy VII. Now, don't get me wrong, I love me some Final Fantasy VII. If you haven't played this game yet, you totally should. It's a milestone in gaming history. But that said, thematically, this game is all over the place. It talks about daddy issues, mommy issues, environmental disaster issues, identity issues, love triangle issues, love in the workforce issues, post-traumatic stress disorder issues, metaphorical post-war Japan issues, more identity issues, surrogate father issues, industrialized nation issues, coping with failure issues, death issues. I mean, look at this. What is this game trying to say? Again, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the game shouldn't present all these issues, but since there's no clear unifying theme, it hinders the overall strength of whatever message the game is trying to say. You see, a game can have a central topic, an underlying idea that manifests itself in all sorts of different ways. The main theme can then have sub-themes that are extension of the original idea, but applied to different scenarios. Remember when I talked about friendship as the main motive in Guardians of the Galaxy? It also presents the sub-theme of self-sacrifice, something which friendship is involved with. The concept of having a theme with sub-themes supporting the main one is what writers call thematic resonance. So what would be a good example of thematic resonance in games? Well, buckle up, cowboy, because we're going to talk about Red Dead Redemption. Yeehaw! Red Dead Redemption's motive is simple: change. The game tells the tale of John Marston during 1911. It's set in the Wild West, or whatever's left of it. The game starts on a train, which represents along the storyline a form of change in itself. It's the government stretching into the wild and chaotic lands of the West. It's the rise of technology over nature. It represents the end of savagery. Or, so it seems. John has to hunt outlaws who used to be his buddies back when he was an outlaw himself. If he fails the task, the feds will harm his family. He's left with no choice other than to dive back into his past. But can he do it? The game portrays the thematic resonance of change and all difficulties associated with it throughout its characters. For instance, Bunny McFarlane had to step up and lead her father's ranch ever since her brother left. This is a sign of change in itself, as we have a female leader in a primarily male-driven society. But Bunny also wishes to have change of her own. She wants to be romantically involved with John, something which she has no control over. Now look at Landon Ricketts, an aging gunslinger who has to deal with a world that no longer needs his help nor his abilities. As the train of civilization marches into the West, he chooses to back away from it and move to Mexico, where he can continue his role as a vigilante. Abraham Reyes, a Mexican rebel leader, believes he'll be able to change Mexico for the better by overthrowing the corrupt Augustin Allende. But as it turns out, Abraham is as corrupt as his nemesis. As Abraham's power grows, he proceeds to exploit the very same people he pledged to protect. Sometimes change doesn't really make any difference at all. Edgar Ross, the director of Bureau of Investigation, believes that bringing order to the West is worth any cost, even if it means kidnapping John's family to coerce him into action. As the law of the West changes into the law of the government, the game seems to imply that one can be just as savage as the other. It also highlights the hypocrisy as Edgar Ross keeps changing the terms of his deal with John. Dutch Vanderlinde, John Marston's former gang leader, loses his sanity as he realizes that the world he desperately wishes for will not come true. And ironically, he cannot change his own idealistic nature either.
We can't always fight nature, John. We can't fight change. Can't fight gravity. We can't fight nothing. My whole life, all I ever did was fight.
That leads to the theme of change to John Marston, or better yet, the player. What Red Dead Redemption brilliantly does is that it forces the player to confront the change motive through its mechanics. After John captures all his former gang members and returns to his family, you'd expect the game to end. But it doesn't. The player has to do various chores like herding cattle and scaring crows. It's a sharp contrast with the previous high-octane action sequences the player became accustomed to. John Marston may want to change his life to quieter days, but as the player, is that what you want? One of the last missions will have you herd cattle across pasture when you spot a gang of train robbers. The game allows you to choose your own path. You can fight the bandits, or you can just keep herding the cattle. Whichever one you choose will reflect a little bit of who you are. And that's the key element here. With themes and choices, games can turn into mirrors that show the players who they really are, what they're really made of, even if they don't even realize it themselves. I call this concept of themes through player choices as thematic mirroring. Let me give you a personal example of that. In a surprising twist at the end of Red Dead Redemption, John Marston gets killed by Edgar Ross. You then assume the role of John's son, Jack Marston. But the game doesn't really tell you what to do after that. It just leaves you be standing by the grave of your parents. In a clever use of multidimensional flow, the player can track down where Edgar Ross is. While pretending to be a messenger, you find Ross's wife, then his brother, then finally Edgar himself. You duo Ross, and if you win, the game is over. Now, here's the part of the story that keeps me awake at night. I killed Edgar's brother. I shot him in the back. The game didn't tell me to do it. I just did it because I hated him that much. I know it's just a game, and in real life I would never do such a thing, but I was able to vicariously live for Red Dead Redemption, a side of mine that I didn't know exist. Perhaps I'm not that much of a pacifist after all. It's by looking into the thematic mirror that you can face the game's final dilemma. Can you change the violent world that surrounds you? And if you could, would you still do it? You tell me.
We tried to change. I mean, ain't that what you're supposed to do?
We did change. And it's over now.
I hope this video gave you some useful insights on how games can reflect the player's true self. Which thematic mirrors in games were the hardest ones for you to face? Drop a comment below because I'd love to read it, and I'll do my best to reply to each comment. Don't forget to subscribe and share as well. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.